Let's talk now to Paul Moorcraft, who worked extensively in the UK Ministry of Defence and is now Director for the Centre for Foreign Policy Analysis. Thanks ever so much for coming on the programme. Let's talk about this a little more, because the United States has said it's negotiated a ceasefire, which is now in force. Do you think it's going to hold?
No. Very sadly, no. Your reporter there was saying there was some evidence of gunfire. It's difficult to find out exactly because the phones and the email systems are down in Khartoum mostly. So I would very much like the ceasefire to hold. Khartoum used to be the most peaceful, friendly, safest city in Africa. Now it's the most dangerous. I'm afraid it won't hold. I hope it holds long enough for those British aircraft and other foreign aircraft to get in and rescue some of the particularly dual nationals and British passport holders. I don't think it'll hold. If it lasts 3 days, I'd be very surprised.
Well, if your worst fears are realised and the conflict continues, what impact could it have, do you think, on the wider region?
Well, it's a very intense conflict between two men. These two generals know each other very well. Let's call them intimate enemies. They know each other very well. They hate each other very well too. And this war is going to go on till one side wins, one person wins, or the other is killed. It will expand, and it will have a big impact not only on refugees. South Sudan is in a very bad state, and yet people from Sudan are moving to South Sudan. They're going to Chad, which can't hold any more or support any more refugees. So there's going to be an extra refugee crisis in the whole region. And it was a pity, because Sudan was very stable, particularly, for example, for controlling the vast amount of people who were trying to illegally enter Europe. Sudan worked to stop that. So this is going to be another Libya, perhaps even, God forbid, another Somalia. So it could, unless the international community, and I don't mean the Americans or the British, I mean the local influencers, Egypt and Saudi Arabia particularly, they're the only ones who can have a real impact.
It's interesting what you say about it being very much a standoff between these two intimate enemies, and what we're seeing, as you're saying, it's almost like a flare-up, but that yet you're comparing it to big conflicts, Libya, Somalia. The conflict, though, does go back very many years, and I wonder if you think that what's been happening over the last few days is really different from that legacy.
It's different, but also a similar trend. The fighting started in 1955, while the British were still running the show, technically the British and the Egyptians. And it was the longest war in Africa between the North and the South, between Muslims in the North, largely Muslim, and the Christians and the animists. And when that war ended, which Omar al-Bashir, the long-term dictator, managed to end the war, which cost him a lot of support in the army, there were lots of tribal, religious issues, but those still exist. The power of Islamism, the Muslim Brotherhood, all these things are important. But the most important thing is the hostility between these two generals. One, as I've met both, one is a conservative, traditional military man, plays by the book, has got the support of the stronger side, the army and the Air Force, whereas General Hemeti, and I spent a lot of time in Darfur, is very much more flexible. He's not a conservative with a small c. He's a flexible guerrilla fighter. So he's making the most of a smaller force, no air force, but both sides have support from outside, and that's locally particularly, and the Russians a bit. But they are going to continue fighting. As I said, this is a war to the death. This is a duel between, the phrase I just used, intimate enemies. This will go on until one is defeated. That's sad.
Yeah. Sobering news there. Paul Moorcraft, thank you very much for your analysis.